They're great. Just pause the video and go buy them and come back here and I'll reassure you that you made an awesome decision. Alrighty, hello children over 30. So we are here today to talk about bottom half of this. This is the Endless Arc CS sitting on my FR1 boots. So I've already done a first impressions video of these. And if you want to check that out, if you missed it or something, I'll leave a link down in the description. You can go check it out. In that, I talked about how, aesthetically taking them out of the box, I was very pleased. The machining on them, I was very pleased. The first session on them was in that. It was an indoor session. I was kind of indifferent about them at that point. So this is kind of going to take off where that left off. So after that first session, when I had some kind of growing pains with them, what became of that? So my first time skating them, I lined them up, centered on the boot the best I could. I used the wheels that came with them. I rockered them in the most rockered position because I'm a psycho and that's what I do. And yeah, I just skated them, inside at my little guitar studio. So right away, even in that less than ideal situation, first time skating them, just the odds basically stacked against everything. I could tell that for edge transitions, they were really, really smooth. And it makes sense that they would be really, really smooth because, so how this frame works is it basically alternates 76s and 68s. So that gives you effective 73 millimeter wheelbases between each one of the wheels. And if you thought that the radiuses that you could achieve on a 4x80 were tight, like the 73 is on another level of tightness. Not to say that you can't get bigger radiuses. Like, if you think about a semi-truck driving around a circle comfortably, like you can do that same thing on a motorcycle. Does it take a little bit more control? Yes. The semi-truck's going to be, more locked into position as it transverses the circle, but it can be done. And in addition to that, the motorcycle can, of course, do tighter radiuses as well. So similar experience on these. The thing that was making me most nervous about these is just how long they are. I think it's like a 292, something like that, effective 1 to 5 wheelbase. I at no point had any bad experiences with the back of the frame being too long. In fact, we'll talk about it later, but I had a lot of instances where I shifted the frame back, and as far back as I shifted it, like it never became a problem. The toe, though, was fairly immediately a problem. So like I've mentioned before many times on this channel, there's a couple different ways to do something like a 3-turn. So there's, of course, the very edgy version, which, wizard skating knows is the lion. And then there's what I would consider the more figure skatery type of 3-turn, where you come up on the front of the wheel or blade or whatever, and you make your 3-turn, you come back down, and yeah, you go. And there's value in both of those, right? Like there's no such thing as a bad move. In the right context, like every move is valuable and wonderful and just great overall to have in your arsenal. So that was the first big question mark that I came across. Like, would I get used to this extra space in the toe? Because yeah, my first time skating it, like it screwed me up. It was a bad deal. Next time skating it, didn't make any changes. I did notice my body was starting to become accustomed to the differences and compensate for them adequately. And after that, what I did was I started playing around with this very front wheel. So the first thing I did was I took out the 76 that usually goes in there, and I had that rockered up with a black axle. And I put in a 68 and rockered it down. So I added like 2 more millimeters to the effective rocker in the front, and it got a little position-y feeling. So by positioning, I mean when you go through the different wheelbases, like back to front, if you can super feel the transition from one to the other, that feels position-y to me, or that's how I refer to it. So with that giant rocker in the front, it definitely felt like very position-y. But the more lifty tricks, like, the lifty 3-turns and the brackets and all that, like I was able to do. So that was like something that I could live with. But I did want to see if I could get away with less rocker, a little bit less of a position-y feeling. So what I did was I took a 72 and then did the silver axles down. So if you're not super familiar with this frame, one of the really cool things about it is that it comes with 2 different sets of rocker axles. So it has black ones and silver ones. Black down is the least rockered. Silver down is the next least rockered. Silver up is like the 3rd most rocker, and then black up is the 4th most rocker. So with the 72 and then the silver down, I effectively added about another millimeter to the stock rocker. And that was still feeling pretty good. It was less positiony for sure, but it was still that fighting with the front wheel, just being so far out in front. For reference, by the way, I'm a 42. My feet range from about 270 to 273, depending on the time of day and which foot it is and all that stuff. So the final course of action, one of the really nice things about these frames is that they have vertical slots in the front and back, and you can use that to vertically adjust the frame. So if you want to take the whole frame and shift it that way, you totally can. If you want to take the whole frame and shift it that way, you totally can. And you can do it in smaller increments than the 15 millimeters or so that you get with the horizontal slots. So what I noticed was perfectly centered, the slots sort of outlined the 3 holes on a traditional 3-hole or, 9-hole mount, 7-hole mount, whatever it is, the 7 ones. So the next course of action was to take it back the distance of like a bolt hole. So what I did was I just adjusted the frame down towards the heel to where the top of the slot was covering up that hole. And I figured out one of these little endless frame locks locked in there perfectly in this position. Went skating with that setup, and it was awesome. Like so much better. It was still a little bit long in the toe. To this day, I still think this toe could come back a few millimeters, maybe 6-ish, somewhere between 5 and a centimeter. But it definitely put it into the realm of, okay, I'm gonna skate this a couple times, I'm gonna get used to it, it's gonna become normal, I'm not gonna have any problems. And again, I was super enjoying having the extra length in the back. One of the things that I've been working on a lot in my skating, and I've always worked on a lot, is just posture. And when you hit those back inside outside edges, especially when you're doing turns and stuff, the ability to lean back and really trust that heel wheel is gonna have your back is very nice. Sometimes on smaller like 4x80 setups, it's a little dicey. You don't want to lean too far back because that's how you crush your skull. So then after that, I was like, okay, this is amazing. Let's see if we can make it more amazinger. So then I took it back basically like a whole other hole. So at this point, we're talking about 15 millimeters back from centered, and it was just too much. I will say that the toe wheel was in a really good place for me, but the whole frame just felt off. It was like I had to really rely on my heels more than I would prefer, which generally good skating happens in the heels, right? Or the heel to like the center of the foot. You have good posture when you're centered over your skating foot and you're standing very tall and you're pushing through your heels and your arches and stuff like that. You don't want to be all like hunched forward like some kind of weird gorilla with skates on. That's weird. But it was just too weird for me to have it that far back. There's a difference between being stable and comfortable in that part of your foot and being completely locked into it because every other part of your foot is completely useless at that point. So I ended up putting it back, which is where I have it now. The second time I went and skated, I noticed that these 3 wheels here in the center were just sitting in really opportune places on my foot. So I noticed that this center wheel right here was pretty much centered on the inside of your foot, there's a little bone that's a little bit north of your arch. So if you think your ankle bone and then just go down and forward a little bit, there's that little bone on the inside of your foot, right? And this guy was pretty much lined up with it, maybe a little bit forward from that, maybe. This wheel right here was a good distance forward from, the back of my heel. So when I wanted to push through my heels, it was very easy to really like get on top of this wheel or even behind it, which again, great for doing like back tricks. Those of you that aren't super nerdy, you probably got the information that you were after. So, henceforth, I can't be held accountable for the nerdy shit that I get into. So when I imagined a 5-wheel frame, what I imagined was a 4-wheel frame with an extra wheel in the front, if that makes sense. So let's say you take your average 4x80 frame, it's rocketed in the front and then it's rocketed in the back, and then you just add another wheel out here to the front that's a little bit higher. And that at the time made sense to me because it was like, it's nice having that like rockered front wheel, but what if you had one in the front of that was even like more rockered? Like, wouldn't that be more awesome? And I think the conclusion that I've come to skating this frame is no. And here's why. So this frame is actually more like a 3-wheel frame, a tiny 3-wheel frame with 2 wheels in the front and the back to serve as sort of like oh shit wheels. So you're skating on these 3, and yes, there's a little bit of rocker that happens here. And then when you go forward to do tricks, you have this wheel to catch you. and make sure that everything, goes as planned. And if you go back, you have this wheel to catch you and make sure everything goes as planned. And even though there's a rock ring happen here, it's because the wheelbase is so small, 73, 73, they can afford to be not that rockered and still give you the performance that you want. So this, when I put it on a table and sort of, try to spin the wheels and stuff, like I absolutely can. But then when you put your body weight on it and the wheels squish, like it becomes like a cohesive 3-wheel thing. And yes, if you're leaning forward, you're going to get a little bit more squish here and then, not as much here. Vice versa, if you're leaning back, you know what I'm saying? But the point is, when you skate a very rockered 4-wheel setup, it is often so hard to get enough grip. In fact, in the 4x80, the only way I found to get enough grip was to spend $20 a wheel on NPC wheels that have, they're dual durometer, they have a flexible core. Like there's so much going on with those wheels in order to make them just stick to the earth. And with this setup, these are 85As, these 3 ones in the middle. And I do think these cloud wheels are a little bit more sticky than your normal 85A, but I'm still going to probably drop it down and try like an 82A, maybe go back to the 78A, something like that, because I love a lot of grip. But I can say for sure that these 3 85As were gripping more than my 2 in the middle that were 78A. So just adding another wheel is just amazing for grip. The other thing that makes me think that this 3 + 1 + 1 is sort of like the magic sauce idea is just going back to what I was talking about earlier, about how I got this middle wheel to sit like right around the peak of the arch of my foot. Like what a great place for a wheel to be. This one is a little bit far back from the ball of my foot, but then, these two sort of meet at that apex between like the toes and the ball of the foot. Like what a great place to be. And this one, super far out back, so it'll catch me. And then this wheel is a little bit forward of my heel, so if I want to, get on it and really dig and make, this position a thing, I can totally do that. So yeah, it's rare that a product changes my opinion on what things should be so much. But it totally did. My whole perception of, what a 5-wheel frame should be is different now. My opinion of how each of these like wheelbases should function is different now. More refined, better. The last thing to kind of think about on these is, okay, so with the black ones rockered up, these outside wheels end up rockered quite a bit. And then so this is your primary skating surface the vast majority of the time. These two are kind of basically like trick wheels. So what's happening is the rocker here is getting a little bit more drastic. I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I think I'll certainly like lose a little bit of grip as it progresses. If I was going to be picky about it, what I would probably do is just put a softer wheel here in the middle and then harder ones here, like maybe go 78A for this one and then like, 85 or 82 here. And I think that would level it out quite a bit. But again, I'm not really concerned with that. I think that these 3 are going to kind of naturally wear in a way that I'm going to find advantageous. The big concern for me is like these outer wheels being just trick wheels. So they don't wear like hardly at all. You can see if I compare, this one looks like I've skated it like, maybe 1 time or so. And then these look like they got some sessions on them, right? So over time, that undoubtedly will make the rocker a little bit weird. And there's no way really around that. So I can't fault Endless or, anybody else. Like there's no way that you can have that much rocker on something and then not run into this problem, right? So the solution, easy enough. Well, easy enough based on, what kind of wheels you want to get. But instead of 76s in the front and the back, my resolution is to just get 72s. And so the reason that that's going to work is because there are so many rockering options with these outside wheels, right? So what I can do is I can get 72s in the front and the back, and then just start with the black axles like rocker down, or maybe the silver axles rocker down, depending on, what I'm feeling. Then as these start to wear, if it gets a little bit weird in the front, maybe I'll go silver up. If it goes a little bit weird here, maybe I'll go silver down. And just sort of use the rockerable axles as a means to compensate for how much these middle wheels are wearing down. And honestly, by the time I get through like, 3 adjustments like that, it's going to be time to get new wheels anyway. So to wrap it up, who are these for? So I personally, for doing a lot of move skating and stuff, I don't mind the smaller wheel sizes at all. Big advantage to larger wheels is you get more coast, right? But if you think about the nature of the skating that I do, theoretically we do, when you're doing moves, you're changing direction a lot, right? So at that point, your level of coast, quote unquote, is more a factor of how precisely did you do your move? You know, what sort of move did you do? What sort of technique did you do it with? All these other things. But the size of the wheel, I mean, the wheels are going to be changing direction constantly. So to that end, it makes no sense to use like huge wheels like 90s, 100s, anything like that, because you're not really reaping the benefits of any of them. You can say that you like the wheel spacing on a 4x90, but if you put 72s on your 4x90 frame, like, I don't think that you would have an objectively worse skating experience doing this sort of stuff. Maybe even better, because you could accelerate faster. You know, that's one of the benefits of smaller wheels, they accelerate faster. And to that point, you know, a lot of this style of skating is finding little ways to accelerate, you know, ways that you can sneak pushes in and, you know, gain powers from edges and stuff. You know, it's far more about finding little ways to accelerate than it is about, you know, coasting in one direction. So to that end, I think your quote unquote wizard, quote unquote flatland, quote unquote flow, quote unquote moves skater would really appreciate these. I don't know that they're necessarily the pick for somebody who incorporates a lot of urban skating into their style. So if you like to go out and skate the city and do some moves here and there, I would probably look at something else. Something with at least 80s. More ideally, something like 84, 90. I probably wouldn't go with 100. But, you know, something in that like 84, 90 range I think would be really good for you. And, you know, maybe even 100 if moves are very low on your priority list. Like, if you just want to do a gazelle here and there, like, fine, get 100s, it'll be fine. And for the rest of us, you know, that go to a parking garage or, you know, some sort of sport court or like a nice parking lot or something like that and just like drill moves endlessly, endlessly. Yeah, I think these frames are great, and I would highly recommend them for that purpose. If you love moves, then you will love the Endless Arc CS. Yeah, 10 out of 10 for sure. All right, so that's all I got. Winter weather is coming through, so the video release schedule is going to be a little bit sporadic. I'm going to talk more about that in the next video that's coming out. Should be next week. So thank you for watching, and I will see you later.